Hi, Yoel. Welcome to the show.
Hello to you, John, man. Thank you for inviting me on, man. It's a pleasure to be able to be on this platform, man, and be able to chat with you. So thank you so very much for this
Oh,
opportunity. I
well, it's
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure, sir. I mean, you contacted me and you said you wrote a book, and I've got the cover right here: Thoughts of a Kingdom Citizen, Earth Needs Heaven. Apparently, the original government you have at the bottom of there too. Well, that sounds very fascinating. Right up my alley. I love things about theology. I do like history. I like geography. I like fantasies. I guess I like a lot of things, but theology is one of my favorite personal favorites. Studying comparative religion. So let's get right to it. Before you tell us about the book, which we'll get to, tell us about your fascinating life. Who are you? Where do you live? And how did you get to the point where you wrote this book?
Yes, sir. So my American born name. So I have two names. My American born name is Bremen Denzel Walton, and I was born in Southfield, Michigan, Providence Hospital, and I I was born to two loving parents who were within what which was called the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And so eventually my parents they got divorced while I was relatively young, but my mom continued to keep the faith and continue to go to the Kingdom Hall of Witnesses. And so that's where myself and my younger brother Dominique, we both were frequent the Kingdom Hall, and that I would say, John, formed a lot of my thinking. I think it formed a lot of my behavioral patterns, I would say, and ideology growing up. But man, like as a kid, I would just, I feel like I had a really good childhood. I feel like I'd, people look at, growing up Jehovah's Witness, people look at us and then they say like, oh, you're very religious and you're very strict, which sometimes can be very true, but I always appreciated my mom and I would say both of my parents bringing some normalization to us and not really wanting us to look at ourselves as being other just because of this religion that we were born into. But yeah, into that washed out society. I grew up doing what they call field service. So I grew up a lot of my childhood into my adolescent years and into my early 20s as well. Knocking on doors, passing out Bible tracts and pamphlets, and having seeing people peek through the blinds and seeing them close the blinds and turn the lights off and things of that nature when they saw us coming by. And then of course we got some who are open to Bible study and coming to the Kingdom Hall as well. And so also my childhood was filled with field service, going to conventions, and just hanging out with my buddies inside the organization as well too. And my I would say the point that kind of got me to or that catalyzed me writing a book was what was 2020 actually. And I was thinking about I was thinking about the question you asked one of your guests. You asked her, what was one of the first things that you wrote? And I was thinking like, man, like what was the first thing that I wrote? And because I really didn't write that much when I was young. Like now when I think about it, I more so would play with toys, and my brother and I we have very active imagination. So the toys that we couldn't afford, we would take the toy, and sometimes the toy had other pictures on it, and we would take that cardboard backing and we would cut it, and we would play with the cardboard and pretend that those were actual toys. And so I really didn't write that much until high school, And so what really sparked my interest for what I think what really changed the way I thought about writing was I came across this literature within high school by this author Toni K. Bambera, and her writing style, I had never seen this before. Her writing style was very colloquial to the point where it sounded like people who grew up within my neighborhood.
Right.
And that really struck me as really peculiar because my English teacher, Miss Serini, would definitely fail me for doing that. Like it had to be proper English
Yeah.
whenever you write an essay. Like it couldn't be any slang or any colloquialisms used. But that really struck me as very interesting to see. And so fast forwarding when 2020 hit, that's when I really began to lean more into this what I would call this hobby that I feel like I discovered is truly a gift during 2020. I began so the first thing that I wrote in 2020 was I woke up early during that time during the pandemic, and I would just write out scriptural musings. I had this blog. You go out and check it out if you wanted to. It's called the Lep to Horror blog. It's a WordPress blog, and I would just write out my thoughts from scriptural musings. I have short satirical stories on there about real life, poems or poetry on there. I have written interviews on there as well, and so that began to catalyze me to saying, you know what, I think that I should really sit down with myself and write this book. But I was scared to write the book because of the religion around me. But that right there, John, is the very long-winded brief answer to your question regarding who am I. Hope prayerfully that demystified me a little bit to your audience.
A question I should have asked off the top of this conversation is about your name. It's Yoel ben Yisrael. Am I pronouncing that right?
Oh, that is beautifully said. Yes.
Okay. Tell us all
Lift
about
my
how the name change took place.
Oh, yes, yes. This is a story. The truncated version. I discovered that I am of Hebrew heritage, that I actually have bloodline connection to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob or Israel. And so I'm from the Shemitic line. And so once I discovered that, I was like, man, I really want a Hebrew name. So I prayed to the King of Heaven. I prayed to our Heavenly Father, and I was between two names, John, Yoel and Yedidiah. And in this prayer, I said, God, I said, Yahweh, if you were to show me a sign regarding either name, it doesn't matter to me if it's in English or if it's in Hebrew. I'll know that's the name that you're giving me within your kingdom. That's the Hebrew name that you want me to have. I go to work, Staples, the next day, or probably a couple of days later. A customer walks in. I'm doing what I normally do. I'm cashiering. And as I'm ringing this customer up, I look down at his belt loop, and his name tag says Yoe. No, it says Joel, Joel. And it takes everything in me, John, to just scream right then and there and do a happy dance. But I gotta stay professional. That's when I knew that was the name that I'm going with right there. So prayer works. Prayer
Okay.
works.
All right.
Prayer
Well,
works for sure.
yeah, in the Bible, as you know, name changes take place, at key moments in some major spiritual thing happens, and the name changes over. It's a
Yes.
common thing. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Absolutely right. That yes. Spot on. You spot on with that. You spot on with
All
that
right.
point.
Before you were saying that what you wrote, you were hopeful that wouldn't conflict with your faith, or how did you put it?
Yes, yes. So I was I had reservations writing the thoughts of a kingdom citizen because I I just knew that it would stir up the waters regarding my the religion, the religious people that I was around. So what I mean essentially by that is the the idea of the good news message that I was preaching within this movement was not the same good news message that I was preaching when I began to read the Bible for myself, and specifically when I began to read the Bible in within the Hebrew text. When I began to see like, oh, this beautiful book wasn't really written in KJV English and with all the hither and thither and doth. It was written in Hebrew, and so I began to become a student of Hebrew. Still am. And when I began to see that there was a good news message that I was missing from the Messiah, I said, "Oh, I gotta write about this."
Okay.
But I knew that there was a competing good news message that was also gonna stir up some waters too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, I'm beginning to understand. So where are you, where do you stand now? Are you still part of the Kingdom Hall? Are you a Jehovah's Witness?
So no, I'm not. So
Okay.
regarding the Kingdom Hall, I wrote my letter of disassociation around January 2013, right? And so I eventually began to research the organization because and perhaps you and your audience can relate to this too. When you're a teenager, I kind of feel like, and I don't know why it is, we kind of go through this rebellious phase. I don't know why that is. When you get 18, you think you know everything.
Well, it's just
Um,
seeking the independence. You know, you're breaking free and you're becoming an adult. It's natural.
yes, yeah, and so I really began to research the White Star Society and to look into the founder of the organization, Charles Tass Russell, and to look at the origin story. And I began to see things that were, in my view, just weren't congruent with what the Hebrew Bible was teaching. And along with that, discovering my Hebrew heritage as well, I was like, oh man, well, I don't think that this religion is what I'm supposed to be practicing. And so I wrote my letter of disassociation. I still love Jehovah's Witnesses to life. Like they're the sweetest people
Mm.
that one could ever meet. But yeah, eventually, for me, I decided, you know what, I think that God he's calling me to a different path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Does that path include the Savior known as Jesus Christ?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, but 100%, 100%. Yes, and it's so funny because and I write about this within the book too, how I thought I knew the Savior. I had this image of what he looked like, of his psychology, of his ideology, of what he taught and what he preached as the good news. But as I began to study, and I like how you say, I guess you just coming to your own, and you becoming an adult. I began to see that, man, this is a way more interesting character than I took him for. And so yeah, I write about that within the book too, and I did my best to show that this character is really preaching the best news that we could ever hear. And he's so fascinating, and I see why people, he's fascinating, and I also think he's the most misunderstood human that walked the earth simultaneously. So yeah.
Okay. All right. How much of the New Testament have you studied or are studying currently?
Yes, so I have read the entire New Testament. What is very interesting now, John, is that I'm reading the New Testament in Hebrew now. And when I tell you that it's like I've never read the New Testament the New Testament before, because I'm seeing things within the original Hebrew language, the Hebrew tongue, that I just would have never seen within the English text. You know, all the Hebraisms, all the idiomatic statements that they make, that the Hebrew people make. Things get lost in translation when I'm finding out when I read it in the English text, but in the Hebrew text, it makes so much more sense, and it's so much easier to connect the dots. So when I read Matthew to Revelation in English, I get one sense of understanding, but when I read it within the Hebrew text, it's a whole new world of understanding, and I feel like it adds so much more dimension and so much more depth to the characters, especially when we talk about the Messiah, the Hebrew Messiah.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yes.
What about canonization? Have you done any studies as to how the New Testament's canonized, or in fact, the Old Testament as well, or the entire Bible for that matter?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So, with canonization, yes. So, I do believe we're within the 66 book canon, for sure. And I'm also looking at books that are mentioned within the 66 canon that when I turn back to the table of contents, I'm like, where's this book? I mean, did this this book was just mentioned. So I guess, for example, there is a book mentioned in the book of Joshua, where he mentions the book of Jasher. And
Hmm.
it is during the episode where the sun stands still, and I immediately began to I turned to my Bible. I was like, I gotta go to the table of contents and find this book of Jasher. And so I'm looking Genesis, I'm looking at the I'm looking at the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I'm like, I don't see Jasher. Like, where is it? If it's mentioned, but where is this book? And so I began to see that there are things called the pseudepigraphical books, deuterocanonical books, the apocrypha writings,
Yeah.
and also intertestamental writings as well. And when I tell you that this made me, I mean, it filled me with so much joy. First of all, I'm a nerd all by myself. I can like Barnes and Noble is my Disneyland. Okay, like
Right.
I can get lost up in there. But to know that there is more literature that I can read to give a clearer picture of what happened between Malachi and Matthew, the 400 years of silence, as they say.
Fascinating. That's a fascinating part of history. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I mean,
The Maccabees, have you read them?
oh
All
my
four of them?
goodness.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's it's so rich, and see, this is why people used to ask me the question, why do you read such a boring book? Like that book, it's you're reading the same book over and over and over, but I do my best to articulate that. To me, the Hebrew Bible, it is so unique because it is a to me it's a living document. Every single time when I read it, when I read one verse when I was 13, it hits differently with me being 34 years old now. And so I'm sure when I get older, it's going to resonate different with me on a spiritual, on a solical level when I get older. And then, but then to find out that there are these lost books, like you say, the Maccabees, the history about the Greeks and these people who rose up,
Yeah.
it's so inspirational.
That would make a great movie. Maybe they've already made a movie about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But for me, the First Chronicles chapters 1 through 7, I still can't warm up to that. It's just begats after begats and begats,
Genealogy.
these names after. It's probably very important for theological purposes, but boy, you don't hear too many sermons on that.
No, no, you're right. You sure don't.
Yeah.
You sure don't.
So how do you identify now?
So now I identify as a kingdom citizen of heaven. I now identify as a citizen who belongs to this kingdom called heaven. And when people ask, well, like, what does that mean? Because they said, well, I thought that heaven was this, this far away, ever elusive reality in futurity. But what I what I'm gleeful to share with them is, you know what, I used to think that too. I used to think that, we just do our best to to live our lives as best as we can, and then, then we taste heaven. But what I realized is that the good news, it really burst my entire bubble, because when I read it within the Hebrew, the Messiah was saying that the kingdom of heaven has arrived. And during his generation, he was inviting people, tax collectors, prostitutes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, Zealots, anybody who was willing into the kingdom 2 millennia ago, 2,000 years ago. And so now when people ask me like, who are you? What do you identify as? I say yes. Well, I'm a citizen of heaven, and we all had this opportunity to enter into it. And I'm just glad that God, he called me into his kingdom, because I I think that I'll be hard pressed to find any other government that is as beautiful and as utopian as heaven's government. So yeah, so that's how I identify it now, as a kingdom citizen of heaven.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
you
sir.
certainly seem very faithful in what you believe. Where do you do your worship? What branch of Christianity do you go and do your worship in?
Yes. So what's very interesting is, I honored the what was called the Sabbath. I frequent, in my home assembly is called Great Awakening International. And so they have different assemblies, like across the world. They're in the States, they're in the UK and Jamaica and the Caribbean and things in Africa, as well too. And so yeah, so I frequent those assemblies within the Great Awakening International, as well. But also too, I go to different home fellowships as well, and fellowship with them and break bread with them, and talk about the word, and talk about life in general, and how we can do our best to make earth look a little bit more like heaven. So yeah, so it's pick a day, like Savage, some, like, and I'll be at this assembly one day. I'll fellowship with this group the next day, and it's fun to be able to have that flexibility, because as I'm sure being a podcaster and interviewing people are very interesting.
Oh, yes,
Uh,
here. Yes, here.
and they're very interesting, and being able to glean different stories from people, of different backgrounds, different walks of life, it's always fun, and it's always very exciting,
Yeah,
to do as well.
sure. Do
Yes,
you
sir.
get any static from people? I was involved in ministry in the Pentecostal church, and they would warn against people, and who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Not that they're bad people, but they obviously don't have the right message. And so say with Mormons, and if a Jehovah's Witness came into a Pentecostal church, it's not that they wouldn't be accepted, but people would pray for them, pray for their souls so that they stop being
That's
Jehovah's
right.
Witnesses. So with
Right.
this version of yourself that you identify within the Christendom, have you had any criticisms that perhaps you're not doing it right?
Mm. Yes.
I'm not making that criticism, but I can easily see some people saying, you know what, you got this all wrong.
Yes, yes. Yes. So it's it's very, very so much interesting, because as a kingdom citizen of heaven, what I'm realizing, John, is that the Messiah went through the exact same thing.
Hmm.
And when I see that within scripture, this new kid on the block, this young rabbi who is in his 30s, having these 12 students who more than likely 11 of them are teenagers, and but the elder statesman probably being Peter, but with them being married. Um, when the Messiah, he's going through his ministry and his kingdom ministry, him being a kingdom preacher, and with him not really belonging to any religion, not really belonging to Pharisaism or Sadduceeism, or going out to the Qumran caves with the Essenes, or being part of Sakari or the Zealots, but or not even joining the Sanhedrin, but just being all for the kingdom of heaven. I see that the most, and so somebody told this to me, a very, very wise doctor said this. He said the most antagonism that the Messiah received was not from tax collectors, not even from prostitutes, not from sinners, but from religious people. And that's exactly what I see. And that makes me smile because it lets me know that, okay, I'm in good company. If the Messiah was getting smoke and getting contention from the religious people of his day, who am I to think that I am higher than him or above him? Because, like it says, a rabbi or a student will become like his rabbi. So, who
Mhm.
am I to think that if they call it the house of the head Beelzebub, that they're not gonna call me some names, So
I got
yeah, so
yeah.
people do say, well, no, no, well, Shabbat, the Sabbath is done away with. You don't have to eat kosher because I eat kosher. You don't have to wear tassels and per Numbers 15,
Okay.
or you don't have to celebrate the biblical holy days in Leviticus 23. So yeah, but I feel like I'm in good company.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with your studying of Hebrew and reading the Bible in Hebrew, it's a challenge. What is your take on the origin? Like, if we go back to Genesis, do you look at the creation of the world, including the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, as a parable or as a literal reality that those things actually did take place?
Yes, I look at that as a literal existential reality,
Okay.
that those things took place. Yes, um, because to me it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense that uh when I read about the story of Adam and Eve and what they lost, I believe that they lost their citizenship, that they lost a whole kingdom called heaven when they declared independence within the garden, by rebelling against heaven, and by sinning, and by obeying the snake, by obeying the adversary. And we fast forward all the way to 2024. I see that the Adamic race is still searching for this utopia, still searching for this state of peace. And I see right now, your backdrop, you have the peace symbol, right? We're all looking for this utopian, uh, peaceful environment, because I think, John, that somewhere, somehow, don't no matter if you're a Christian, Buddhist, you practice Judaism, Talmudism, what have you, somewhere, somehow, in the deep recesses of our mind, as the Adamic race, we remember that there was a point in time where, and you and I were talking, I guess, quote unquote, backstage, about this. There was no racism. There was no discrimination. There was no need to be refugees on the run, running from a crooked government, because there was a time where the whole world was just peaceful. And I feel like we're all trying to get back to that, whether it be through religion, through Hollywood coming out with movies, and through comic books. I think we love superheroes so much because they remind us that we were made to have dominion over the whole earth. So when we see a Superman who can leap buildings with a single bound, and he can stop a bullet with his hand, it's like, man, I don't know what it is, but I feel like Adam was able to have dominion like that. I feel like he was able to, the same way the Messiah was able to um, not be shaken by anything. When a storm came, he could walk on water. And they asked, well, what manner of man is this? This was the same man that we were all created to be. So I feel like those stories are so true because we are still searching for that utopia each and every day, consciously and also subconsciously.
Okay.
Yes,
How old is the planet Earth, in your opinion?
man, that is a great question. That's a good question. That's a great question. You know what? I don't know. I don't know. I I I know that it's older than I am, being 34 years old. But I don't. I to be honest with you, I really don't know. Um, I
But
don't.
science says it's about 4.6 billion years old. Young
Right.
Earth theorists range between 6,000 and 22,000. Very few people are in the 22,000 range. It's usually between 6 and 10,000 is the common young Earth theorist. Do you fall into that category?
Um, you know what? I think that the the, I guess when you look at like you could look at archaeological data and you look at anecdotal data and you see things that they find and things of that nature. Um, I conjecture, 'cause like I say, like I really I really don't know.
Okay.
I would conjecture that it's maybe a little more ancient than the young earthers think that it may be. But that's just me.
Well, in my
Just
opinion, when I was religious, I still didn't think that the age of the earth really mattered. I mean, that didn't
yeah.
seem to be part of the faith system that I was part of, though some people insist on it. I don't see the point in it, but, to each his
Right.
own.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as look, as long as the earth is stable and it ain't quaking and it's not fragile, then I'm cool with that. I'm cool
Okay.
with
All right.
I'm cool with that.
When did you start writing this book? It was in 2020, you said. When did you finish it?
Believe it or not, this book took me under 1 week to fully write. And the reason why I wanted to say that and I want to articulate that is because I kind of feel like with us as writers, and I'm sure you can resonate with this too and relate to this too, is is that sometimes I know for me I can be a perfectionist.
Hmm.
Um, I want the comma to be in the right place, the
Yeah.
semicolon, the sentence structure, the syntax to be right. No, no, you used the wrong word in that paragraph. No, the introduction didn't. It's not as attention grabbing as it could have been. And so there's so many redactions that we do to where it's like sometimes we go to our graveyard with this book still in us. And one of my I heard somebody say that this wise doctor say that we are meant to die empty, and that we should do our best to take nothing to the graveyard, but to leave to bless, to not rob our generation with the gift of writing. And so I want I don't know why I'm going there, but I guess I want to encourage that author that's out there, or that soon to be author that's out there, that to don't worry about it. Don't worry about it being super duper perfect. Just start writing. Don't be intimidated by that blank page, by that blank cursor that's keep blinking at you. Just keep writing, and that's gonna help you. You'll be able to polish it out as you go. But as for this book, yeah, it took me under a week to write it. But I feel like it took me 33 years to gather the data and the experiential wisdom and the anecdotal evidence for this book.
And what do you use it for? I mean, I know it's for sale, but do you use it in your ministry and for handing out and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. So what I essentially use it for is I use it mainly for it to be this conduit and this vehicle for spreading the good news
Hmm.
regarding the kingdom of heaven. And so with me, my prayer, my hope is that with me being vulnerable and with me being honest and with me sharing my anecdotal journey from leaving a religion essentially to enter into the kingdom of heaven and living as a citizen of heaven, that people are going to see that the good news message that's within the Bible, it's so beautiful and so good that the adversary doesn't want people to see it. And prayerfully through my journey and through my dry sense of humor that's within the book too, that pops out sometimes,
Hmm.
it'll encourage people and let them know that you lost something, and you may not know that you lost this thing, that this passport, if you will, to heaven. And I'm doing my best to give it back to you under 30 pages. And so you can probably read this thing in one day with your coffee,
Oh,
with
yeah,
your
sure,
tea, what have you.
for sure.
Yeah.
But imagine people who would be interested in this would read it over and over again and find inspiration
Yes.
constantly from it. Yeah, I see.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the little I know about people who leave the Jehovah's Witness, sometimes it's not a very pleasant situation. So, what does your family think about what you're done here?
Man, that is such a very interesting question, John. So I'll start with with my mother. Um, my mother at first, she was surprised to see. She didn't like it by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, and so it was a very poignant interaction and very poignant departure from the society, because I knew how how deeply attached my mom was and still is to the organization, but also too because I was climbing up the ranks of the ecclesiastical hierarchical structure, if you will. Well, within the Watchtower, they have this thing called Bethel. The headquarters is in New York City,
Yeah.
and so that's like the Yale and or the Harvard for Jehovah's Witnesses to go. Like that's the creme de la creme
Hmm.
to go there. And so I had everything ready, and I had my portfolio, my headshot, I had my resume, if you will,
Wow.
like everything. But then to make this hard pivot, it definitely was shocking to her, surprising, and so yeah, so that took her by surprise. So she was not happy with that, and but simultaneously, I could see God's grace and God's favor, because the protocol, John, is for them to completely disown me, to
I
not talk
know,
to
I
me.
know.
Yes, yeah, to not talk to me.
And it's not like you became an atheist. You have even stronger, richer faith in what they profess as well. I'm very curious. How did it all turn out in the end?
Yeah, when I left the organization, I definitely lost a panoply and a plethora of social networks. So all the friends that I had within the organization, they can't and they won't talk to me. I remember vividly, very vividly, working at this mall here in Michigan, and seeing one of my Joe's Witness friends from afar, him, and he's with another friend, and I mean, like I mean, just seeing him there, and I'm working at my kiosk, and he literally just he walked right by me like I just wasn't there, and so that reality kept on playing itself out over and over and over again, to where
Yeah,
it's like, man, this culture of shunning is real, and this
yeah.
culture of just like, you're dead to us is real, because we now view you as this apostate to the faith, right? This cancerous thing to the organization, and we don't want you to metastasize and spread to the rest, and to influence or infect people. But I see twinkles of grace, especially when it comes to my mother. because she did not disown me. As a matter of fact, I have the luxury of doing a podcast here in the home right now. That's proof positive right there.
Oh, excellent.
Um,
Hmm.
yes, and so that's how I play up with my mom. It took a while, and I think just like what you said, I did not become an atheist. I think that cushioned the blow. I think that was a pillow to say that, hey, I'm not putting down this book called the Bible. Um actually I actually have, for some reason, I'm hungrier and thirstier for it.
Hmm.
Mine is the religion, which is very interesting.
Sure.
Um and so my dad was another area of grace for me as well, because he too was climbing up the ecclesiastical hierarchy, and I found out that he had left the organization, and I didn't know this. And I was like, "What? You're leaving?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Well, man, like, can we talk about this?" He said, "Well, meet me at Starbucks." So we met up at Starbucks, and when I tell you, John, that 2 hour conversation felt like it was 2 minutes.
Hmm.
It went by so fast, and we just talked about the organization and what we found in our research, and it it was liberating for me to hear his side, and simultaneously, and being a son, you don't want to disappoint your father,
Hmm.
and so it was like this sigh of relief for me to see that he wasn't gonna shun me
Good.
because I was still in it, because he already left. And so, folk can't tell me that God, that he don't have a sense of humor, because that was the punchline that let all the tension out of the room from me. And I
Yes.
was like, oh wow. And so I feel like that he was doing something beautiful. Even though at the time it seemed really scary, he was doing something very beautiful.
Okay. Very
With
good.
that.
Very good. I'm happy for you. Shunning is not a nice thing, and I don't know much about it, but it sounds terrible.
Yes.
Um, you
So
have a website. You want to talk about that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, have a website. It's called setapartkingdomprep.com. And essentially, this website, it started off as my wife's idea, and when we got married, it became this fusion, and this intertwine of ideas. Um, and so I would say now, with me going from being religious minded to more kingdom minded, this website is to encourage people, to equip, to embolden people to not necessarily push a religion, or not necessarily to proselytize people, but to equip people with tools and with free and premium resources to make earth look a little bit more like heaven. So we have things like marital resources on there, that talk about what you can do to optimize your marriage, biblical principles of heaven to help with your marriage. We have like media resources on there, like the podcast that I have that's on there. We have devotion. We have devotions on there, or we call them like meditationals, to help people within their walk. And essentially, for me, the whole vision, John, with this website is, and this may sound crazy, and it's definitely not going to sound religious, by any means of the imagination, but I envision this website helping people to plant kingdom of heaven embassies throughout the world. Because what I'm noticing about Kingdom John is that, and governments and a period, is that they have these things called embassies. And so what I'm seeing is that we're really not supposed to be, these people who are just behind four walls and scared to talk to people who look like John, and who have eclectic backgrounds, who can play music, and who are very are talented and artistic. People who look, smell, or look different than us, who believe different than we do. But it's about us working for this heavenly government, and it's about us inviting the world to regain their citizenship status back
Hmm.
because they fell not from a religion, but they fell from this kingdom that if you enter into it, it's going to help you to regain everything that you lost. It's going to help you regain that peace. All these intangibles that we're looking for in material things, it's going to help you with that. So that's my vision for this, for it to create these kingdom of heaven embassies to where you can go here and you don't have to come to me. You can go to that guy who's in Canada, for example, and he can help you get your passport, quote
Okay.
unquote, so to
All right.
say.
Okay, Yoel, this has been a fascinating conversation. Do you have any plans to write any more books?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I have one book, a collection of book that's already on the way. It's
Okay.
called the Aleph Bay Collection, and it's geared to a different demographic. It's geared towards Gen Z, Generation Alpha, and it's basically short story books that promote kingdom principles of heaven, and it's filled with like Hebraic wordplay and as well too. And also a future book that I want to come out with is called "Marriage is Like the Garden of Eden,"
Okay.
and yeah, I'm that's gonna be a very very fun book to write about. So yeah.
Okay. Okay, Yoel, you're welcome back next year. Season 5 will start probably up in June, July, thereabouts. And I'd like to have you back on. If you have written something new by that point, we'll have another conversation.
Absolutely, I would love to. This was super duper fun.
Okay,
Absolutely.
it was. It was. Well, you take care of yourself, Yoel.
You too, John. Thank you so very much again.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, and if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment if you wish. And if you are an author, I would sure love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing, and remember to be kind to one another.